overcoming business obstacles is indeed important to business growth. But how about those who think big and have the ability to thrive over challenges but get stuck due to lack of awareness about facilities and benefits available to them? Delving on this topic is our first panel discussion on government's role in entrepreneurship development. Are entrepreneurs aware, involved, and really benefiting? Let's welcome on stage with a grand round of applause our moderator, Mr. Amer Ahmad from Vincent Masons, and of course our esteemed panelists. Please come on up here, Mr. Amer Ahmad. Thank you. Our esteemed panelists, please, Ms. Renuka from Centurion Consulting, Mr. Hassan Abdul Karim from Mohammed bin Rashid Fund for SMEs, and Mr. Martin Tydstrom from ADGM. Hands together, please, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning. Hi. My name is Amer Ahmed. I'm a partner at Vincent Masons in Dubai. Vincent Masons is a law firm. So we have a panel discussion. We want to keep it very interactive. So I hope you guys have topped up on the coffee. You'll be needing it. So the panelists for today are Ms. Renuka, Martin, and Hassan. And I hate doing introductions of people, but I think people can introduce best themselves. So I'm going to start with you, Martin, if you can just do an introduction of yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for attending and for inviting us here. My name is Martin Tydstrom. I work with business development for ADGM, Abu Dhabi's broad-based financial center.
Thank you, Amir. My name is Hassan Abdul Karim. I'm the director at Mohammed bin Rashid Fund. Basically, Mohammed bin Rashid Fund is the financial arm of YSME.
Renuka.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. So, I'm Renuka. I head the consulting firm Centurion Consulting. Been working with startups and entrepreneurs for the last 22 years across 8 different countries, and been in Dubai for the last 8 years, and seen the way Dubai has been growing and improving and providing facilities to entrepreneurs. So thank you for having me on the panel, and I look forward to a great session. Thank you.
Just before we get to the panelists, I thought I'd do a bit of really looking at the topic of this, right? The government's role in entrepreneurship development. Are entrepreneurs aware, involved, and really benefiting? So, to give you an introduction, about 4 years ago, I got a call from Dubai Economic Council. They said, Amir, could you please come down and see us? So we went to the meeting, and they said, well, I think we have a problem. I said, gosh, when someone very important in Dubai says we have a problem, you sort of, you sort of sip a cup of coffee. I said, so what is the problem? The problem is that entrepreneurs and SMEs are complaining that they are not able to get bank funding. And I'm a finance lawyer. I said, okay, that's interesting. And this gentleman, and I'm looking at Saeed, the gentleman mentioned that the banks are saying that they can't take security on the assets of the SMEs. Can we do something about that? To cut a long story short, we did a report for the Dubai government, and the main issue was that banks couldn't take security on the assets of companies. We came up with a couple of recommendations, very practical recommendations based on my work that I've done for the World Bank. And one of the 10 recommendations, the top recommendation was have an online registry, right? And the Dubai government said, we promised that we will have that. So earlier this month, we were blessed to have the online registry operational. So it will be, it's the first change in making possible that bank funding could potentially go into the SMEs. At least the government has sort of fulfilled its role on that. Let me start with some of the questions to the panelists. Martin, I mean, what do you consider as critical needs that entrepreneurship, environment requires? What is it that entrepreneurs do, from your perspective?
Well, thank you. I think that's, of course, a wide and very interesting question, and there are needs across education, across infrastructure, across bankability, as you mentioned, across proper legal frame, across knowledge, across connections with the market. I think from our point of view as a financial free zone, and I know many of you are familiar with what that means here in the UAE perspective. ADGM, the same as DIFC, are federal free zones. We are carve-out jurisdictions where local laws on civil and commercial areas are disapplied. And ADGM has chosen to fill this mandate we've been given to legislate by applying English common law, which is trusted, which is recognized. We believe that one of the key challenges for entrepreneurs and SMEs through their life cycle is to create and help provide a safe, transparent, legal environment for business to meet finance. And that, in our case, can mean a number of different measures. It's providing proper legal structure for companies in an environment where attractiveness from an investor point of view is higher. It's understood, it's trusted, it's transparent. Legal vehicles are flexible enough, cheap and easy to use. And on that base, then helping bring in investors to create that meeting space. That, I think, is something very important in our part of the world that we are putting our initial efforts on.
Thanks, Martin. Hassan, you work for the Mohammed bin Rashid Fund for SMEs. Tell us a bit more about that fund and how that operates.
So Mohammed bin Rashid Fund for SME is the financial arm of Dubai SME. We're basically focused on providing financial advisory and financial help for all SMEs or even entrepreneurs who are looking to establish a business in Dubai. Today at Mohammed bin Rashid Fund, we provide different kinds of services. Those vary from a seed capital that goes up to 1 million dirhams. It's a seed capital to start a business. We provide an invoice financing scheme for businesses also. Needless to say that those two schemes are without any interests, no profit rates or not even fees. Recently in 2017 we also started working with Beehive, which is a peer-to-peer financing lending platform. We started working with them on a new scheme where we provide lending to SMEs. We provide lending to SMEs through peer-to-peer, where the network and the society can help lend the SMEs, and we guarantee those loans as a large amount.
Thank you. Danica, are there any examples of government initiatives that you think people out there, the SMEs that are attending this event, would not be aware of? Are there hidden gems that we can all discover?
Yes. Dubai is full of surprises, and especially the government is taking so many initiatives, but they're not very effectively known. To take forward from Mr. Hassan, where India Fund is promoting SMEs in Dubai, there is another fund, India Innovation Fund, which is not just restricted to local entrepreneurs. It is open to all the expats with great innovative ideas. That is something like entrepreneurs are not aware of. Dubai is looked upon with the rest of the world as a city where you can come, innovate and implement your thoughts and your ideas. But what are the avenues and options available to them? And this, I think, is one important scheme which is available, but which is not known. I feel with my interaction with the entrepreneurs across the globe, this is one such scheme which I found as a hidden gem, I think it should be more often talked about and be more made aware of in the roadshows that the government holds across various countries.
Thanks, Danica. Hassan, so if I am an SME and I want to benefit from your fund, practically, how does it work? What do I need to do?
So basically, it depends if you have a business or you're looking to start a business. Realistically speaking, over the last 2 years, we've been focused more on startups. but we also assist SMEs that have already started their business, who are looking for growth. The way it works is that we require clients to come to us with a business plan, with a feasibility study. At the end of the day, it's a loan that has to be repaid. Once we go through the due diligence process, we go through the business plan, we go through the feasibility study. If everything is okay and we're happy with the business, we require the client to come. We require him to present, because at the end of the day, the way we see it, we've been in the business of the market for the last 16 years. The way we see it is that 70% of any business success is the entrepreneur himself. So we ask the client to come to present the business, to see how he thinks about the business and how his knowledge is about the economy and how his knowledge is about the sector itself.
And how long does it take, the whole process, door to door?
It depends. So if it's an invoice financing, we're talking about less than, maybe probably we're talking 23 weeks. If it's starting a business, it goes up to 3 months.
And Martin, when we were talking about earlier, you mentioned something called a meeting, sort of a platform or a meeting place that ADGM is organizing, where basically you can have the investors meet the people who require capital. Can you tell me a bit more on how that works?
Absolutely, and I think that's very much at the core of what a financial center is, creating the legal environment and services and to some extent physical infrastructure as well for investors, for capital, for financing of various kinds to meet businesses. In the SME space, and that's a very interesting field for us. We're young. ADGM was opened in 2015, but we already see that we're gaining a lot of traction within startup and SME financing. Roughly 10% of the 800 plus entities set up in ADGM to date are specific startup and SME investing vehicles, and we have a number of SMEs operating within our environment as well. A couple of things we have learned during our relatively short journey is that founders and investors, they like this international, transparent legal environment where certain of the technical laws are more business-friendly than they might find elsewhere in the region. Insolvency regulations, for example, the ability to protect international or intellectual property, the possibility to structure investment, stock option programs, etc., to register securities, for one. So we have something that's in demand and in growing demand, just using the legal environment for something perhaps as simple as putting a holding structure for a company that might operate in another free zone anywhere in the UAE or for that matter in another country. But the founder can meet his investors within the legal environment of ADGM, secure the funding, sign shareholder agreements, for example. So that's at a very basic level, but I think we can do a bit more. So looking at some of the areas where ADGM has a unique position to help, we have a very strong community of professional service companies and training providers. So we're looking at launching quite soon a support program for founders, entrepreneurs, really across industries, on basic business-making skills, on law, on accounting, on compliance, together with the community we already have. We also have this benefit of knowing certain industries quite well, such as fintech. Others, we know that we are not necessarily the right partner to provide the mentorship, the knowledge, the industry connections. So we partner with a number of other accelerators, primarily across Abu Dhabi, and that includes Start AD from NYU, Khalifa Innovation Center under Khalifa University, INSEAD, Fikra Labs, which is a cooperation between some of the biggest tourist industry players in Abu Dhabi. And at the basis of that, attracting more and more SME activity in ADGM, we can also then be an attractive platform for the angel networks, for the VCs, for the private equity firms. First, just to make the transactions within the ADGM legal environment, providing that level of confidence to all stakeholders, but also gradually attracting more and more of these financiers to physically locate in this country.
How many of those financiers do you have? How many VCs do you have on the books at ADGM at present?
The number is still quite small. We have launched a VC regulatory framework from a regulator. We will soon also launch one for crowdfunding. So we're taking more and more regulatory steps to make the environment even more attractive for you.
Renuka, I mean, a lot of what I hear from entrepreneurs and from female entrepreneurs is that there aren't really any, initiatives geared towards them. What is your experience in that field?
There are a lot of women-driven networks and initiatives here, but the problem is it's all concentrated in university levels, as a part of education, as a part of curriculum, and people going to the university. The younger lot is much benefited out of it. There are a lot of women out there, the local women entrepreneurs, who are looking at doing something. So they have very good business ideas, they want to come out, reach out. There is no single platform where they can actually approach. Like for instance, Dubai SME is doing a great job. So when you get in Dubai SME, you get all the handholding that is required. But where a business involves various approvals, various systems, the entrepreneur has to run around everywhere. There is no single window agency which will ensure that once the entrepreneur gets in there, all the licensing part is taken care of, And another important aspect is how do they approach. So when you are looking at India Fund for development of these women enterprises as well, so you have the opportunity, you have a fund, but there is no awareness as to how do you go and approach. So that awareness needs to be more created within this space where universities are doing a great job in developing the entrepreneurial skills. At the same time, there is a large segment of women out there who want to come out and do something, and I think they should come out with a way where they are able to reach them.
So, what sort of solutions would you have in relation to that particular issue?
Yes. Basically, I think ideal way, just like we do a roadshow anywhere, I think something in the mall which will promote very specific, because that's a place where most of them visit here. So you can have specialized kiosks in the mall which are able to talk and target women entrepreneurs locally here, which would be a great way of at least for them to be aware that these are the initiatives that are being offered right now, or in schools or wherever there are places where women visit regularly. I think that should be the place where you actually go and try to touch base with them. That part I feel is lacking in this current ecosystem.
Okay. Hasan, are there any success stories, right, that you want to share with us? Some companies that came to you and gone through the funds, applications, have been successful in getting those applications, and have made it, on high street, I guess.
As I said, Dubai SME does not only focus on funding. We assist SMEs with establishing their business through advisory and mentorship, through Dubai Entrepreneurship Academy. The last thing that we look at is funding. So it's the last spot that we look at. If I'm going to answer your question in terms of funding, the successful entrepreneurs or the successful businesses that we have funded, maybe I can give you two of the or maybe two of the most famous ones today in the market. Fridge, I don't know if you know the cartoon Fridge. They started with us. They were funded through the Dubai SME and the Rashid Fund. Another one is Ahdaf, which is the indoor football club. Those are the two maybe famous ones. But again, going back, I think the issue here is that many people, when they talk about the Dubai SME or the Rashid Fund, they always think that the only way we assist businesses is through giving them loans or funding. It's not that way. As I said, we have three different segments where we have entrepreneurs. So if we're going to start with an entrepreneur himself before starting a business, we provide mentorship programs, we provide advisory programs, we have the Dubai Entrepreneurship Academy that have different diplomas in different sectors for entrepreneurs. And then going through a startup, we don't, again, I would like to emphasize that before looking at giving an entrepreneur a loan, we look at how to assist the entrepreneur through reducing his costs. So today in the business, today today in the market, why SME members, whenever they're starting a business, for the first 5 years, they get waived of government fees. We have agreements with different real estate agencies, with different government-owned agencies where we provide discounts also to those SMEs. They want to open a retail shop or a commercial shop. So we look at it from that way. And then another point is that before looking at funding also, at the YSME, we try to integrate the SMEs in the market today with the government. We know that today that the government is the biggest player in the economy and they're the biggest purchasers. So we try to help those SMEs with getting businesses from the government, with winning tenders with the government. In 2017, we were able to assist SMEs with winning around $1.5 billion of tenders for the government. And then again, the last thing that we look at is the financing, the loan.
And Aslam, if you, from your experience working with funds, are there any top 2 issues that are common in a lot of the SMEs that you've seen? And in relation to those top 2 issues, are there any quick fixes that that SMEs could use?
Today, what we see in the SME market, one of the issues is that the entrepreneurship awareness. We have that issue where everyone wants to become an entrepreneur. People look for quick success. It's not an easy path. It's a very difficult path. It needs a dynamic person. It needs someone who's willing to do changes in order to succeed in the business. Another issue that we see today in the market, which is unfortunately happening over the past, I'd say, 1 or 2 years, it's an issue that we've been facing. We've been seeing also the same issues being faced with banks, which is why they have also reduced working with SMEs. It's basically receivables. I would say this is the biggest issue in today's economy. So SMEs have to be careful. It's not about getting a business. It's about, at the end of the day, it's about getting paid for the business that you provide.
So effectively managing your cash. Martin, so if I'm an SME, I'm here. What can you practically do for me?
Well, I think the first step would be to help you provide a proper legal domicile. I think that's the basic offering of an institution or a phrase like ADGM. A simple, cheap, transparent structure for, as a holding company, for example, for your business if you're already up and running, or as an environment for your startup activities, from which you're in which legal entity, then you can make sure that you structure your business properly from day one. And I think, going back to your previous questions on key challenges, I think we see a lot of entrepreneurs across a lot of different sectors here. Many of them, of the entrepreneurs, are brilliant in their fields. They're innovative, they see opportunities, they have the technical ability to make things happen. But business skills or the understanding of the future financial needs of the entity might not be there. And it is very important to get this right, to structure your company properly, to protect the key assets, which for at least many tech companies are intellectual properties, to make sure that the rounds of funding and the agreements you make with other key stakeholders are transparent, are clean, are easy to understand for future levels of financiers, hoping that you are successful. So I think that is a start level. Then going on for that, access to an ecosystem. ADGM's 800 companies, you have access to a lot of advisors, to the banks, the asset managers and the VCs within this ecosystem, to a strong and growing community of family businesses, many of which take a great interest in following the SME sector, supporting, making business with and investing in. I think those are good starting points.
Okay, so what you're saying is if I'm an SME, I can have my holding company in the free zone.
Absolutely.
Right? If you just wanted to have a free zone, and sorry, but I'm going to ask you very, very specific questions. What is the cost of a holdco in ADGM?
If you set up the most simple structure, special purpose vehicle, it's one of the ADGM products that are in very high demand from principles really across industries. We have a number of SPVs in use by the likes of Adi, Alibaba, the big sovereign players. We see aircraft financing transactions taking place of them, shipping finance, and a lot of SME finance. When we designed this product, we wanted to make sure that it met the needs of sophisticated investors and that it held up in international comparison when it comes to features, setup, time, and cost. They're cheap. We charge $1,600 for the year during which it's set up, then $1,200. It's not something we as an organization make money of, it's just something we know is in need in this market and we want to make it available.
Okay. And then the other thing what you said is to basically have the right legal documentation around your business.
Yes.
So, I mean, are you making a database of, let's say, simple contracts that people can pull out and sort of use? Is that, are you working on that?
It's a very good question. We see there is a need for a lot of value-added services on top of the relatively simple corporate offering I just mentioned. And this is something we are working on together with the private sector. We as government, we are the platform. We're not necessarily a participant in the market, but we have a lot of interesting partnerships with both commercial firms, other state or semi-state-owned entities that promote support. And I think we'll see a lot of development in this more hands-on support. So yes.
Excellent. Veronica, the last time you were here was a couple of years ago, and you had a couple of success stories, that you mentioned. Any new success stories of entrepreneurs that you've coached that have come up the curve and are sort of established players now?
Actually, like since I work with startups and basic first entry-level entrepreneurs, it's very interesting to see them grow and then ready to fly. And we've had many such instances, both local Gujarati women with whom we have worked in the past, and also the other expats who have come here who have been able to expand in more than 5-6 countries now, starting out from Dubai. And it gives a lot of pleasure to see them go. And right now also we are working with very good technocrats who are working in Internet of Intelligent Things, IoT, which is the new space, and they're all coming to Dubai, making a beeline, to wanting to be here because they feel that this is the place where they can actually establish quickly and grow faster. Because that space, like I was seeing in one of the presentations, its turnaround time was 6 weeks, the delivery of growth. The implementation time was 6 weeks, which led to their growth. That should be the space and the ecosystem made available to entrepreneurs so they can grow. And I think this is the right destination to be in for such kind of activities. And I'm hoping that maybe in the next 1 year, 1.5 years, they will be everywhere.
So, what are some of the big challenges, from your client base that people have faced?
Look at it from the expats who are working as investors coming into UAE, I think the first thing that scares them off is the 51% shareholding, which is mandatory. That's one thing they're all very skeptical. And when operating in a free zone, because earlier laws, if you were in a free zone, could you operate in the mainland? That was the area of concern. Being a free zone company, you cannot have a mainland office. So how do you establish yourself? Though free zone is a very good option. So all these factors would be the challenges where they took a lot of time, like decision making got delayed because they were not clear as to how the system works here. That understanding, maybe the ease of getting a right entry strategy to the expat investors is of crucial importance before they are able to make up their minds and come here. So once that bottleneck is crossed, once they're able to understand how the system works, then it's fairly faster. So in terms of the biggest challenge is legal issues, the entry structuring itself, and then going forward, how do you reach out? Because here you have all the big names and all the big companies, but how do you access them? Because accessibility is one crucial factor. You may have a great product, but unless you know where it is going to fit in, it becomes very difficult for them to be here and still not know where to look for. So these two things I feel are the biggest challenges that clients across the globe who are coming here are facing.
Excellent. I think, shall we take some questions from the floor, guys? If anyone has a question, please raise your hand.
Just raise your hand and then the girls will come find you with the microphone. So make your hand nice and clear. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Melissa. My question to you, Martin. you mentioned intellectual property a couple of times, which I would assume is about registering the intellectual property, but also making sure that there's no infringement of that. Can you kindly expand on that?
Thank you. You're hitting the nail on the head here, I'd say. I think those of us who spend some time trying to look into this area know that there are some challenges around, especially enforcement of intellectual property in a number of jurisdictions here. We are not yet able to provide a full solution to that. I think the lack of injunctive reliefs under the UAE legal system is still a challenge, especially from an IP point of view. What we have seen so far is that ADGM is used as a jurisdiction to hold, to own the IP rights, as has previously often been done in offshore jurisdiction, for example, or elsewhere in the country. This is step one. We are in dialogue with a number of other stakeholders around the issues and more importantly, the opportunities. I believe that if UAE will, with a couple of simple steps, improve the situation, we can do a lot for R&D spend in total, where I think the country is so far behind some of the countries like the US or Germany, for example, that have maybe multiple even of what UAE economy as a whole is spending on innovation and R&D, and for many of the innovative industries. There are steps we can do, and from what I see, there's good interest in addressing them.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Rafat. I'm representing the SME Development Agency of the Republic of Azerbaijan. First, thank you very much for such interesting information. One question that I would like to raise is about the practice of your institutions about the model enterprise. As we know, there is a kind of practice when the entrepreneurs are invited to some model established enterprise, they learn there something and then they practice this knowledge at their own institution. So if there is such an experience and how does it work and what are the outbacks of it? Thank you very much.
Hassan, would you like to take it on?
Well, at Dubai SME, we provide different conferences and we are involved with different agencies that are looking at that, and we're more than happy to set a meeting to discuss the specific needs that anyone has, and I mean our mentorship programs and even our advisory, they don't have to be starting with someone who has an idea. Even someone who's looking to open a business, they can come to us, and we can provide the different thoughts and advices.
Please.
Hello, my name is Fariha Iqbal. I'm the Managing Director of INH Advertising. Thank you for the lovely talk and the information that you guys have passed on. My question is actually a follow-up. Is there a legal clinic? I'm part of the free zone. My license is from the free zone, but I know that you can go in, you can discuss the process of getting the license, of getting the office and what is required. But is there a legal clinic? I know there's a labor dispute department within the free zone, but I'm not aware within DED or within the SME ecosystem if there are legal clinics that once you've acquired the license, what are the other legalities that a company or a startup needs to comply with? And second is more of a suggestion that if all the SMEs or startups can actually get an information-packed checklist that, okay, once you set up a business, you need to do these following things to comply with the rules and regulations. So yes, thank you.
That's exactly what I was, thank you for your question. This is exactly what I was trying to tell. There's no single window agency where you get everything. Because the information is there across any websites, whether it is DED, you know the first step, then you go to Ministry of Labour, then you go to other departments to get your things done. But there is no single platform as on date which consolidates everything in one platform. That's to come from the government. Mr. Almari is here, so maybe we'll have to place a request there. We need a single window agency which says that, okay, you enter in here DED for instance, and everything gets done across that. Whatever licensing procedures is required, after the license you register for your labor, you register for immigration, there are a whole lot of processes that you need to do. So that single window agency is still yet to come, not that I'm aware of. So that is one place. But otherwise, if you go individually to all the e-services called tab in the websites, it will lead you, one will lead you to another. So you will have to maneuver a little bit. But in one screen, you will not get everything as on date. But information is available.
But I guess having that kiosk would mean that a lot of the advisors would have, I mean, you can't really have a kiosk. I think, there are a lot of initiatives that the government is across the board is looking at for seamlessly, giving you as much information as you can. But, it's impossible to give a pack and say, here you go, this is all the information that you require. I think there's a need for advisors to come in and advise you in relation to how that ought to work. And that was one of the questions that I had asked, I was asking Martin previously, as it would be good to have, because advisors are expensive, right? And not everyone, can budget those advisors in for example, the first phase of their development. So there is a rule, there's a role there for the government to subsidize, some of those advisory services, so that you're able to sort of use basically the top 50 contracts that you'd be able to, that you need to run a business. What sort of, permits that you require, checklists in relation to that. Is that something that SME Dubai is looking to create?
We're actually studying this. We're looking to work with different agencies to create this one app that gets all services.
Okay, so watch that space, I guess.
We have time for just one more question before we wrap this session up.
Thank you for coming, guys. This question is for Renuka. My name is Ahmed. I'm a co-founder and CMO of an application called Cricket. I'm from Egypt. I was wondering, you just mentioned about the challenges that expats would have when they come to run their own startups, their tech startups. There's a lot of big names, and it's just how to find the right fit. Can you please give me or give us advice on how to actually trigger that and overcome the challenge of reaching out to those big names and speaking and sitting down and speaking with them? Thank you.
Basically, thank you for your question. So basically the way here it works is like you need to have access to those things, and there is no platform to actually go there and get it. So the way it works in Dubai is basically through networking. So there are a lot of events, there are a lot of networks which you can get to connect through them, and thereon you will be able to get access. And if you have a product or a service which is actually very relevant to the company that you are looking to or wanting to approach, I think you should straight away go and try to get a direct meeting there. It may not be possible all the time because of the several constraints and the availability of the team which is going to handle it, but ultimately it will involve some time because there is no direct access, no direct card where you can get an entry here. So it will depend on networking at the right events, with the right kind of space that you're looking in, and being there, knowing and then making an entry. So technically we say for advisor, as this thing, through experience, it could take anywhere between 2 weeks to 6 months to get the right entry in and get the right place in. But then once you're there, you're set. So that's how it works.
Thank you so much for your question. If we can start to wrap this session up, please, that would be fantastic. There will be plenty of opportunity for further networking throughout the afternoon. Thank you.
Renuka, Hassan, and Martin, thank you so much. It was fantastic to have you share your experiences. And round of applause for the panelists, please.
Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you very much there.